MicroBrewr Podcast, Session 34.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast, inspiring you as you start your own microbrewery or take your existing brewery to the next level. Here's your host, Nathan Pierce.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast, where we talk about everything craft beer related with a focus for people looking at starting their own microbrewery or wanting to take their existing brewery to the next level. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce, and I thank you for listening. If you want to support MicroBrewr, I set up a page, microbrewer.com/support microbrewer. It's really easy. There are several ways that you can support and help keep MicroBrewr on the air. Like the first example is subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or Stitcher and leave a rating or review. The second way is to send an email and just say thanks. You know, I have asked people for honest feedback and I can't really say my fame is to the level yet where I get hate mail. There's been some negative comments. You know, I appreciate honest feedback, and negative comments aren't too cool either. But the positive comments really are encouraging, and I appreciate that a lot. And if you go to the microbrewer.com/support microbrewer, there are other ways to help out and support MicroBrewr Podcast and the website, all the way up to financial support. But you don't have to go that far if you don't feel comfortable doing that. I just encourage you to go there and support this effort in any way that you feel comfortable. It's at microbrewer.com/support microbrewer. And I've been trying out some new things with the microphone, like microphone placement and some audio editing in the back end. So if the next few episodes has kind of bad sound, let's try and live through it, and hopefully I'll find something that works better and we'll have better sound in the end. In this episode, I'm excited because I finally got to talk with Todd Cook from Boulder Dam Brewing Company in Boulder City, Nevada. Todd was one of the first people who I contacted to do an interview for this podcast when I took over for Joe Schellerud at episode 13. And just scheduling and technology and stuff, we were finally able to pull it off. So conversations got interesting. He talked about zombie apocalypse. They do fundraisers for disaster preparedness and Veterans Affairs and some other things like that. So they're also coming up on their 8th anniversary in February. It's going to be their 8th year open. So I'm pretty excited. And if you want to check out the zombie walk and veteran care services, you can go to the show notes at microbrewer.com/session34. Here's the interview. Hey, Todd, I introduced you to the listeners. Let's take a few minutes and you can tell us more about you and your brewery.
Well, Boulder Dam Brewing Company, we opened our doors in February of 2007. We're located in a very small town on the outskirts of Las Vegas, Nevada, called Boulder City. And it's actually the only city in the state of Nevada that has no gaming. And in fact, all the way up until 1959, it was, or until 1969, it was a dry city. So we made kind of a splash when we opened up here in 2007. Not a lot of watering holes here prior to that. And if you guys, if you're familiar with the Las Vegas area, there really wasn't a whole lot of brewing going on here. There was probably about a half a dozen or so breweries when we opened up here in 2007. Now there's probably closer to a dozen now, but it was kind of a novelty for Southern Nevada.
Are you going to open up the first casino pretty soon in your city?
No, that's in the city bylaws, actually. Yeah, there will be no gaming in the city of Boulder City, which makes it a really neat little town, actually, because we get a lot of visitors from Las Vegas. That this is kind of like a breath of fresh air when you come off of the Strip, and there's no machines on the bar, and there's no none of that gambling action going on. It's just a nice, quiet, sleepy town, and we're kind of a quaint little quaint little brew pub made out of steel and wood and concrete, and it's a neat atmosphere.
So people can come into there and slow down, take a breath, and enjoy your beer on their way to Hoover Dam, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, not to spend the whole time talking about Boulder City, but if you're an outdoorsy kind of person, this is where you want to go in Southern Nevada. We've got flight lines and skydiving and river rafting and kayaking, and one of the top 3 mountain biking mountains in the country. And so that's a big part of our business. Actually, is all the people that are active in the valley come out here, and those are our locals, which is funny because some of our locals come from an hour away. Our regulars.
Oh, cool. They're coming there on a regular basis to hit up mountain biking or zip lining or whatever, and they always make sure to stop in.
Yeah, we've got we're right on the border with Arizona as well. So we've actually got regulars that come from Kingman, Arizona, or Lake Havasu, or different towns that are an hour and a half away. But we see them, weekly, if not monthly.
Brewers Union Local 180 was also on MicroBrewr podcast. They're in Oak Ridge, Oregon, and that's I think the mountain biking capital of the Northwest. And he says lots of people stop by in there all the time on their way to mountain biking too.
Cool. Yeah, we love bikers. They're a little healthier than most people, and that's what craft beer is about. Not just being a drunk monkey on some rice beer.
That's funny. So something that really appealed to me or caught my attention was your logo and your whole motif that's tied into the Hoover Dam.
Right. Yeah, we obviously Boulder City was built for the construction workers of the Hoover Dam, and was actually a federal reservation until '59, and then they were going to tear it down. And the residents petitioned and actually incorporated it in their own private town. So the dam is a huge part of this entire area. So we tied ourselves. The brew pub is built around the 1930s. I mean, the brew pub wasn't built around the 1930s, but our motif is designed around the 1930s. Half of our art is all dedicated to the construction of the dam. The other half is all dedicated basically to American breweries that went out of business during Prohibition, which was around the same time. We actually have more. We've probably got, I'd say, 24 pieces of actual construction equipment, some weighing many tons, that fill our entire beer garden. Those were lent to us by the city. And then, in addition to that, we essentially name nearly all of our menu items, and certainly pretty much all of our beers are named after the different aspects of the construction of the dam. Like our number one selling beer, because it's our lightest beer, so it moves the fastest with the tourists, is called Powder Monkey Pilsner, and people always laugh at the name Powder Monkey. But powder monkeys were actually the explosives, if you want to call them experts, but they were the people that dealt with the explosives during the construction of the dam. So, like I said, most of our beers are named after something to do with that.
I saw on Wikipedia that 100 people died in the construction of the Hoover Dam, which is the largest dam in the U.S. by volume, the reservoir, right? I think the reservoir is the largest. How many people have died making your beer?
None, but there have been people that said, "Can I just go in that can I just climb inside that vat? That'd be awesome."
Just swim around in beer. So you sound like you're really proud of the history in Boulder City. So I'm wondering, how long have you been there? Did you grow up there?
No, actually, I moved here in 2006. Once I signed a lease on this building to do the build out and to start the business. So no, I moved from Seattle, but being a military brat, I kind of grew up everywhere. But most recently, I'd spent many years up in the Seattle-Tacoma area, which of course helps you. Even though I was already a huge craft beer fan, living in Seattle, that's one of the beer meccas.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of the beers that we do here I lived overseas for a long time, so some of the beers that we do here are really geared towards some international styles, like our Czech style Pilsner or our Irish dry stout. But a lot of our other regular beers, our ambers, our pales, our IPAs, are all very, very Northwestern style. And that, I think that just comes from living up there for so long and falling in love with the love of the Northwest hop.
Were people in Boulder City and around, or people who visit there also, were they open to the Northwest styles, or was that something that you kind of had to turn them on to?
That's funny. Our IPAs, and we don't do one IPA all the time. We brew probably 10 different recipes 8 to 10 different IPAs a year. They tend to last, 6 or 7 weeks, and we're on to a new one. They are our number one selling style to our locals. But when we first opened up, it was our lowest selling beer when we first opened up, and it really took a lot of pushing people to that kind of not just the bitterness, but also the hop flavor, particularly Cascade hops, which is one of my favorites and one of the most popular hops used. But we had people when we first opened up, they were like, "This beer tastes like grapefruit." I'm like, "Well, that's the hops in it." And so it's funny you ask that, because it's our most popular style now, but it took months when we first opened up to get people to get a lot of people to open up to the hoppy pale ales and the hoppy IPAs.
I like a variety of beer, but I got to say the IPA was, I probably have said this before, the IPA was, it took me a while to get into it. And now that my palate has grown to love it, there's not much I like better.
I agree. I think the first IPA I recall having was Lagunitas when I lived in the Bay Area, and that was such a change from everything else that I was drinking at the time. And obviously Lagunitas is still one of the bigger selling IPAs out there, I guess. But as I've gotten a little older and brewed so much beer, I like a lot of dealing with a lot more of the delicacies, the delicate hopped beers as well. The pilsners and the lagers, and some of that's a lot of fun. I find myself drinking a lot more of the lighter style craft beers now, just to see how it's kind of coming back to that. There's a lot of sessions out there too nowadays that are kind of fun to try.
So how did you get into beer? Did that happen in the Northwest? Into beer making, I should say. Yeah,
I'll try to make a long story really short. When I was a freshman in college in California, and this was back in like the late 80s, early 90s, we just drank a ton of junk, what I call rice beers, just your big, mass-produced MicroBrewrs. But my roommate in college, his dad had to travel back and forth to Europe about twice a month, and he kept this small fridge in our dorm room stocked with all these beers that you couldn't buy in the U.S. And so once in a while, I would steal one, borrow one, when there was no more canned beer. And I ran the first time I had a Spaten, called Doppelspaten, which is now called Spaten Automator. And I was just impressed. I was so impressed with the flavor of that beer that I was like, wow, you can drink beer for the enjoyment of the flavor, not for trying to get a buzz off of it. And then right after graduation from college, I moved to England, and I lived over there for several years. And the Irish beers and the Scottish beers and the English beers, and then I spent a year backpacking throughout Europe and North Africa. So. Just all the great old breweries in Germany and the Czech Republic and Austria. And so I came back to the States in the 90s with this huge appreciation for real beer. And, there were all of a sudden countless small breweries all over. I moved back into California, and there were so many breweries all over the place, and they were producing beer as good as, if not better than the famous beers from Europe. And so that's how I kind of really got into beer. Brewing, I would imagine, is the same as almost every brewer. Somebody bought me a home brew kit for for Christmas one year. I think it was in 2000. And I just started making beer at home, and I wasn't very good at it, but I loved it. And I think it was my third or fourth beer that I made. Was an amazing porter. I mean, I got the recipe off of the internet. I didn't come up with it myself, but it was a great beer. And then pretty soon I liked making beer at home more than I liked running the company I was running. So ultimately, I changed careers.
Okay, so you were running another company before you opened up this business.
Yeah, I was in advertising for 12 years. I had an ad agency in the Bay Area with a branch in Seattle.
San Francisco Bay Area?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nice. Okay, so do you think business experience is necessary for somebody to open up a brewery?
I don't necessarily think that's vital. I opened up this brew pub having only worked at McDonald's when I was 16. That's my only restaurant experience, and that does not translate well to this. So certainly in the food and beverage industry, I don't think you have to have done that. I mean, I read up, I studied. I asked a lot of questions of my friends that worked in restaurants, either as managers or as servers or whatnot. I read quite a few books to try to kind of get up on get a little knowledge going on the food and beverage industry. But I think my time in the business sector still helps because I was talkative and I knew how to do a lot of guerrilla marketing, a lot of really inexpensive stuff, Facebook, Twitter, direct mailers, pamphlets. I mean, there was even times when we first opened up where I stood about 5 or 6 blocks from the pub on a really popular pull-out to view the Lake Mead, which is the body of water that's built up behind the Hoover Dam. A lot of tourists pull over there and get out and take pictures and whatnot. And I would stand up there from like 11 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, passing out free beer cards and business cards just to get people to come on down and check us out for lunch. So I think that, different experiences can definitely be valuable, but I don't think necessarily that you have to have a lot of specifics when it comes to being successful. It all kind of just depends on how bad you want it.
Excellent. That's a pretty good point. Thanks for broadening the picture. Now, let's get focused a little bit. And Todd, I like to go real deep, real fast. So tell me the biggest mistake you ever made as a brewer or as a brewery owner.
I think, we haven't really made a huge amount of mistakes that stand out. I mean, obviously, mistakes are just part of the game. I would say there's been a couple of failed batches that stand out in my mind. We made the first ever fruit beer that we made was a strawberry blonde ale, and having gone from making 10-gallon batches as a home brewer to making 5-barrel batches, which are still small batches by a brewery standard, but that's still 15, 16 times the size of what I was accustomed to doing as a home brewer. Slicing up the fresh strawberries, blending them up, boiling them, and then just not even thinking about the temperature of the wort and adding the strawberries to the wort and not being able to get the wort down to temperature in time to pitch the yeast, and the whole batch going sour, and a week later having to dump the entire thing because you didn't realize that you made a big mistake there. That was one of them. That was painful. That was within our first few months of opening, and that was disheartening for a new commercial brewer to make such a simple mistake like that. And then there've been a few test batches that we tried at 10 gallons, and they were hugely successful. And then when you translate them to 5 barrels, they just didn't translate over the same. That's been a little frustrating.
I was disheartened when I heard all those strawberries going down the drain because I love strawberries. And you mentioned how disheartened you were from that mistake. So that's something that probably everybody who wants to start a brewery or any business or just living through life is going to need to know. Like, how do you rebound from something like that? Like, your brewery just opens up, you're so excited, and then you're just like squashed after a mistake like that.
Well, you know that well, one, you learn from it. And you realize, okay, if we're going to use fresh strawberries and we have to bring them up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit for, I think, 10 or 15 minutes, whatever it is, to be able to sterilize them, well, then, you're not using them that day because you're putting them in the fridge and you use them the next day. So you learn from it, and obviously, you're making your other beers, and they're turning out fine. And it's really when you just, pick yourself up by the bootstraps and you make that batch again, this time having learned from your mistake, and the batch turns out brilliant, and you're like, okay. And you still run across it once in a while. The use of spices is tricky, I think. A lot of times when you do a test batch, the amount of spice that you use comes out very, very prevalent in a beer, and then when you do the large batch, the spices that you use, and you've made the calculation to the large batch, but yet they come out much more subdued and really light in the background, and so as long as you keep learning from those things, and you keep making better beers, that's all that really matters.
Make sure you learn from your mistakes and get back on the saddle as soon as possible, huh?
Yep.
Now, if you could start your brewery over again, is there anything that you'd do differently to do it better?
One thing I've always joked about is I would have built a bigger office. Coming from advertising, the office that your clients or whatnot come to is really kind of part of the show. So I used to have a huge office with fancy furniture and plants and all this kind of stuff, and huge, 8-foot desk and this and that. And now my office is probably 8 foot by 8 foot, little tiny cube, because obviously, it has a small desk and a computer and some files in it. But I didn't realize when I opened this place how much time I would spend in my office. So, yeah, it might be nice to have a little bit bigger office, but that's really kind of the only thing that I would probably do over. I mean, we've had so much fun doing what we're doing, and we're not the biggest, we're not the most awarded, though we've won a lot of awards, but we're having a good time doing what we're doing, and I think maybe I would adjust my expectations. That would be about the only thing. Prior to opening this up, I pictured myself as a bartender / brewer, so just making beer all day long and then tending bar all night long, and having a very small place and like a few little brew pubs I've been up to in Washington State. And we're actually, I think we're fairly large. We have a beer garden that seats 90 and a brew pub interior that seats about 70, and I only get a chance to be the bartender one night a week. And I don't know if there's other brewers or brewery owners that get behind the bar every week, but I make sure to tend bar every Saturday night. I think it's important for the business owner to be in front of his customers and to know his customers, and it's the best way to hear firsthand feedback on your beers, on your food, on your service, on your atmosphere, as if you're actually out there for 8 hours straight.
So you're saying if I open up a brewery, I'm not going to just be spending all my time making beer. I'm going to be having to be in the office a lot and running the business too.
And that's one of the reasons that a book I picked up called "Running Restaurant for Dummies" was important, because I knew how to make beer from a home brewery perspective, but I didn't know how to run a restaurant. And even though I talked to a lot of friends and whatnot, there's a lot to running a little brew pub. Even a brew pub that only seats 160 people. I mean, there's live music. We have live bands here, so you're booking bands. You're dealing with inventory not just for brewing, but also for if you have a kitchen. And we have a full-service kitchen back there, so I also have employees that can do things that even I can't do. I mean, I can cook a burger back there, but I can't make a lot of the food that my chef makes back there. You've got front of house staff. You've got, kegs and distributors and advertising and marketing, and there's a lot that goes into running any business, let alone running a brew pub. So I spend a lot less time making beer than I thought I would, and a lot more time basically just running a business.
There are so many different parts that go into that business. So besides putting strawberry in your beer, what's been the best idea you've ever had for your business?
For the business in general, or for the beer?
Well, usually the question's about the business, but if you have a really good idea that was pertaining to the beer, maybe that would be interesting to hear.
I'll actually go back to what I was just talking about. I think that being extremely hands-on with the customers has been the most important thing for us. Like I said, I start off tending bar 2 nights a week, Thursdays and Saturdays. I think that was important. I'm now down to just Saturdays just because there's so much other work to be done. But I think that's huge to be out there in front. I do all of our Facebook posting and whatnot. I do all of our Twitter stuff, all of our Instagram. We send out an email newsletter about twice a month. I write that whole thing myself. So our customers, our regular customers, they know me. They know my staff, obviously, but they know me very well as well. And so, I get our Facebook posts are we get a tremendous amount of feedback, and our posts are very popular, and they get shared a lot and commented on a lot, and people come into the pub because of them, and because of what we're doing on Twitter, and because of the emails, and they know it's me, and they know it's not some marketing company that we've hired. It's not somebody who sits in the office all day long and they don't know, they've never met. They understand that, hey, that's the same guy that poured the beers for us on Saturday night when we were listening to the band. And I think I think there are better beers made than the beers that we make. I think that's true for pretty much every brewery. Obviously, there's only one best IPA in the world. I don't think we make it, though we do make a damn good IPA. I know there's tons of other restaurants. There's I think 8 or 9 bar restaurants within a 2-block radius of where we are, and in a small town, that's a lot of competition. But I think that we do really well because of our personality is out there. And the same goes with my staff. I have very, very little turnover. Most of my servers and bartenders have been with me since we opened, or within the first year that we opened. I think my newest server has been here for 3 years. So all of our regulars, they know pretty much everybody that they deal with. They see them, day in and day out, week in and week out, and I think that's a huge part of our success, is making sure that our personality runs the business.
Has there been a single moment when you realized that you finally succeeded?
Yeah, on 2 levels, and I'll answer the question with 2 different answers, because I think successes can be measured in different ways. Our first anniversary, what we call our anniversary, we're gearing up here in the next short while for our 8th anniversary. But our first anniversary was this huge party with almost everybody that I knew in this little town was here. And I remember it being so crowded inside the pub that I knew, and we're required to have our maximum occupancy from the fire department is posted above our front door, and I was basically standing below the front door, and I was talking to everybody. I was on the microphone, and we're making some announcements, and we're cheersing things and whatnot. And we were so far above our fire code capacity, it was ridiculous. But sitting at the table directly in front of me was the chief of the fire department, and he was having a beer. And at that point, I knew that we were doing well, because pretty much all of our regulars turned out, and it was this massive bash, and we were only 1 year old, and that was a great feeling. So I think that was really, that still hits home even 7 years later. I still remember that moment. The other thing, though, is I remember talking to, because I mentioned earlier that this is like the outdoor activity mecca of southern Nevada. I mean, you've got everything that you could possibly do here that you want to do outside, shy of snow skiing, is here. And I was talking to a couple of people at the bar, and they were telling me about these great hiking trails that they had been on, and I had never heard of the hiking trails, and they said, you don't really have a life outside the bar, do you? and I thought about it for a second, and they were kind of right. I didn't really know a lot about what was going on around because I worked so much, but I didn't notice I worked so much because I do for a living what I used to pay for. Like, I get to hang out at a bar, I get to drink beer, I get to talk to people, I get to listen to great live music, but yet I'm getting paid to do that. So that, I think, is a different measure. A different measure of success is that, I didn't realize I didn't really have a social life outside of the pub, because the pub is a social life.
I do for a living what I used to pay for. That one's going on Twitter.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned, man, I could hear you talking about your first anniversary, how poignant and memorable and special that was. And my next question, it sounds like I'm going to get the same answer. I usually ask, what's your favorite memory since opening the brewery? And I know you guys have lots of live music and live events and stuff, so maybe you can either say your favorite memory or a favorite event that you put on at your brewery.
Well, my favorite event annually is our charity zombie walk. I'm a member of a nonprofit charitable organization called the Zombie Squad, and we teach disaster preparedness and raise money for worthy causes. And every middle of October, about 2 weeks before Halloween, the pub hosts our annual zombie walk, and it's a fundraiser for this last year. It was for Veterans Care Assistance Program here in Las Vegas, which helps care for Nevada's veterans. But we had about 250 people show up as zombies. We do this zombie shuffle all through downtown Boulder City, and then we have 3 different bands every year that donate their time, and they play all night long, and we donate money. All the money raised goes to the charity, and we donate $1 per beer sold that night to the charity, and we got great raffle prizes and all that. Like I said, the entire thing goes to charity, but it's just this massive zombie bash, and we get them as young as like 3 and 4 years old, and we get them as old as 83 and 84 years old, and everything in between, and it's just an absolute fun time for us. The whole staff dresses up, and so those are the kind of things that those are my favorite parties. But as you know, in the food and beverage industry, I mean, you throw parties for any reason. I mean, we have Drinko de Mayo, and we have the New Year's Eve bash, and the Halloween bash, and our anniversary party. But as far as my personal favorite, it's definitely the zombie walk. That's a lot of fun.
The zombie walk sounds pretty crazy. I think that thing's going to be rivaling Burning Man pretty soon.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the largest outdoor party in the world, right? Or at least in the United States. That thing's insane.
Well, now we have a question from one of our listeners, L. Saber, who asked via email, what are the best classes to take to prepare for opening a brew pub?
Classes?
You said that you read a book to start your brew pub.
Yeah, I read quite a few books and talked to quite a few people, but I have no formal education whatsoever when it comes to either restaurant management or brewing. People ask me, where'd you learn how to make beer? I say, in my garage in Seattle, on my laptop.
So it's not necessarily required.
No, you're right. It's absolutely not necessarily required. And I have a world of respect for all my friends that are actually certified brew masters that went to school for it and whatnot. And they make phenomenal beers. But I mean, what can you not learn off the internet nowadays? So I was just a self-taught. I brewed for 7 years at home prior to getting in the business. So unfortunately, I don't know what class is going to be taken.
So listeners, if you want to ask a question for one of our guests in the future, send your question on Twitter to @MicroBrewr, or you can email from the website at microbrewr.com/contact. All right, Todd, now it's time for happy hour. The next set of questions are a little bit lighter. We're going to get to know each other a little better, have some fun, and get inside the industry. Are you ready?
Sure.
Cans or bottles?
Let me go get a beer real quick. Just kidding. Canned or bottle? Well, we do neither. But I love how the industry is starting to go back to cans, because the improvement in the technology, can is far superior to preserving and storing a beer than a bottle is. There's quite a few brewers across the United States are canning now instead of bottling, and so I like to see that. I also like to be able to crush the cans. It makes my recycling bin go a lot farther than the bottles.
What's the most challenging beer that you've ever made?
It would probably be our pumpkin ale, which there are now several beers that have a name very similar to or exactly like our pumpkin beer, so I won't necessarily mention it anymore. I haven't made it for several years. Dealing with pumpkin, I got 71 pounds. Well, I don't know how many pounds of pumpkin I got, but we carved out 71 pounds of the flesh out of Dickinson pumpkins, and so we probably bought like 300 pounds of pumpkins, and it was a whole pickup truck full, and that was probably one of the more difficult things to do, is spend all that time digging out pumpkins and cooking it and whatnot. And that's why we stopped making that beer. It was it was more effort than it was worth for me.
Wow, all the effort that goes in before you even get to making beer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are beers out there with pumpkin flavor. We don't do anything. We don't do anything with flavors here. Everything's real. Everything's 100%. Like I said, that strawberry beer that didn't make it, that was like 80 pounds of fresh strawberries, and we sat back there in the kitchen for hours slicing strawberries and smashing them and blending them, and yeah, we're low tech around here. We do things like they did them a couple hundred years ago, I guess.
Keeping it real. If you're going to make a 5-gallon batch at home this weekend, what beer would you make?
One of my favorite beers we do here is an IPA that we use Star Jasmine flowers in. So if I had hands on some Star Jasmine blossoms, which unfortunately I don't because it's not the season for it, that's what I would make. I'd make our awesome blossom jasmine IPA.
Star Jasmine blossoms.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I got the idea from Elysian Brewing Company up in Seattle. Really great guys over there. Dick Cantwell, I believe, is the owner or the brewer up there. But yeah, great beer. I forget what theirs is called, but it was an IPA they used Star Jasmine blossoms in the boil. So I borrowed the idea, and we actually grow our Star Jasmine in our beer garden.
That's a local beer.
What's that?
Local beer.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice and locally sourced. Obviously, we don't get our hops from local. Our hops mostly all come from the Northwest or from overseas. But though I do have some regular customers that are growing Cascade hops, and so we'll be using some of their hops next season.
Wow, are they farmers? Like they're growing them commercially, or it's just kind of like on their back porch kind of thing?
Yeah. It's all small guys just trying things out.
How much? I've had some listeners ask like how many, if they want to grow their own hops, how much do they need? Like what kind of acreage are we talking?
Oh gosh, I don't know about acreage, but you got to figure those hop cones, those flowers are so lightweight, and if you're using like 8 pounds of hops in one 5-barrel batch, or more or less, depending on the beer that you're making. If you're just going to brew at home, you probably will be okay with a few vines. But if you're going to be, if you want to start a hop farm, I don't know, get a hold of a hop farmer.
Tell me one beer style that you think will be gaining more attention.
Boy, wow, that's a good one. You know what I'd like to see? I'll put it back this way. I'd like to see stouts and porters go back to a more traditional, to where they came from. You know, porters were hoppier, a little lighter in body and hoppier. And stouts, traditionally from Ireland, they're all in the 4-point range. Guinness is 4.3, Beamish is like 4.4. A lot of your Irish stouts they're all basically session beers. And it seems to me it's hard to find a stout when I'm at the grocery store or the liquor store or the brew pub that's under 7. We like to brew them strong. We like imperials and whatnot. And I don't know. I having lived overseas for so long, I really like those session dark beers that you can drink a half a dozen or so in a sitting and not need to call a cab.
We talked about your book a couple of times. My next question is, can you suggest a book for our audience that will help them succeed in opening a brewery? There's obviously the one that helps me the most, only because I had no experience in food and beverage, was running a restaurant for dummies, which I think my dad laughed at me when he saw me buy that book. Sounds like it worked though.
Yeah, but that had a lot of, because like we had talked about earlier, I think brewers, they know their craft. They know how to make beer. I mean, the American brewing industry is the best brewing industry in the world. We're producing the best beers in the world. But that doesn't mean just because you know how to make beer that you know how to run a restaurant. And obviously you don't necessarily have to own your own restaurant. Most of my friends that are commercial brewers, that's their job, and they work for somebody else that owns the business. But if you're going to be a brewer and a business owner, then you got to learn them both. And most of what I know I've learned through trial and error. But think about reading up on actually how to run restaurants, and also I read a book called Guerrilla Marketing, and that was a great book when it came to either low cost or no cost forms of advertising, because obviously when you first open up your business, you're not exactly heavy with cash. Yeah, that's where I got the idea of standing up at the popular tourist lookout spot and just passing out free beer cards and passing out my business card. And we only got maybe 4 or 5 tables a day off of that. But if you figure your average table is going to drop $100, that's pretty good.
Guerrilla Marketing by J. Conrad Levinson.
That sounds like it.
Well, Todd, tell me something that you're really excited about right now.
Well, my day today is built around getting ready for our Halloween party on Friday. I'm always excited for our parties. What I like seeing right now in the Vegas market is the doubling of breweries in this market, and it's the brewing industry is an awesome industry to be involved with. Coming from advertising before this, that's a very, very cutthroat environment. I used to refer to it as the Shark Tank. It's just, eat or be eaten type environment. The brewing industry is so totally different. I remember when we first opened up, within our first couple weeks of being open, Dave Otto, who's the brewer at Big Dog's Brewing Company up in Las Vegas, stopped in for beers and a bite to eat, and he, in a friendly manner, he really reamed me out for opening up a brewery in the Valley without telling anybody. And he's been one of my best buddies since then. And all the brewers in Southern Nevada were all friends. And, a brewer will call me up once in a while and say, hey, I've got X amount of this particular strain of yeast. I'm not going to need a lot. I'm not going to need nearly this much. Do you need any? Do you want any? I'm just going to give it to you. I've been short on a particular hop once in a while. I'll call somebody up. I've had other people that are short on something or other. They'll call me up, and it's a really it's a very, very friendly, cooperative business environment. And you'd think that the doubling of breweries in the Vegas area would be a hindrance to our success, but it's the opposite. There's more cooperation. There's more ideas, and the more that we can introduce people to real beer, not the mass-produced bland beer, but real beer, the more success we're all going to have. And so if somebody goes to Babby Brewing, or somebody goes to Big Dogs, or somebody goes to 777 and discovers, hey, I really like this stuff, hey, now we have a chance of them becoming a customer of ours as well. So I am excited about what's going on here. This was kind of a brewing wasteland when we got here, and that's not knocking the breweries that were here when I got here. They make great beer, but it's nice to see that there's a lot more of us out here making great beer now.
Well, give us one last piece of advice for someone who just brewed the first batch at their new brewery, and then we'll close up the brew house for the night.
You just brewed your first batch. Get out there in front of your customers. Don't go off how fast the beer is selling, or how slow the beer is selling, or what your servers are telling you. Hey, sit down and have a beer with your customers, or pour the beer for your customers, and find out, get their feedback, because there are some beers here at the brewery that we make because I love them, and there are some beers that we make here because our customers love them. I like them, but I wouldn't necessarily drink our light pilsner, because I don't really like our light pilsners in general. But it's our number one selling beer. But again, if you're not producing beers that your customers are going to want to drink, well, they're not going to produce beers for very long. And so I really think it's important that you would be out there and get their feedback. Ask them what they like. Ask them what styles they'd like to see you brew. Ask them about the beer they've got in their hand right now, and ask them about what other beers that you might be able to make to get them to come back. We ask quite often in our email newsletters. I'll just put the question out there. Hey, not only the beers we made in the past, what one beer would you like to see us bring back for one more batch, but what beers have we not brewed that you'd like to see us make? What style would you like to see us make next? And so, if my customers tell me they want to see a Belgian sour, I'll figure out how to make a Belgian sour. Why not?
Well, thanks for taking the time, Todd. I'm glad that we finally got to talk about your brew pub. We were trying to do this for a while. Thanks for sharing your tips on starting and operating a successful brewery. So tell us how we can stay in touch with you, and then we'll set this episode aside to ferment.
Yeah. You can find us on Facebook, Boulder Dam Brewing, or Boulder Dam Brewing Company. We've got a couple different pages. We're at Boulder Dam Brew on Twitter, at Boulder Dam Brew on Instagram. BoulderDamBrewing.com is our website. It's a great website. One of our customers built it for us. It's a fantastic, very usable website. Or you can just stop by. We're right here in Boulder City, 453 Nevada Way, in Boulder City, Nevada.
Again, thank you, Todd Cook, for being on MicroBrewr Podcast. I'm glad to finally hear about your brew pub. It sounds like a pretty neat place in southern Nevada. Thanks for sharing your stories and your advice about starting and operating a successful brewery. And listeners, don't forget, you can find out more info about Boulder Dam Brewing Company in the show notes at microbrewer.com/session34. And I added some links to a couple of the groups that Boulder Dam supports. So please check that out, and thank Todd for being on the show. You can get in touch with Todd Cook and Boulder Dam Brewing Company through links at the show notes for this episode at microbrewer.com/session34. And you can get in touch with me anytime at microbrewer.com/contact if you want to send an email through the page. MicroBrewr is on Twitter and Facebook at MicroBrewr on both of those. And I'm on Untapped at Nathan Pierce. So hit me up and let me know how the sound is with these new things I'm doing. Don't forget to check out microbrewer.com/support microbrewer and see how you can support MicroBrewr. It's microbrewer.com/support microbrewer. Thank you so much for that. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, support your local brewery, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to MicroBrewr Podcast with Nathan Pierce. We'll see you right here next time at microbrewer.com.
If you want more resources for starting a craft brewery, check out microbrewer.com, microbrewer.com. If you want to become a Cicerone certified beer server, check out beerexamschool.com for free study guide and flashcards for the certified beer server exam. beerexamschool.com.